Right now, as you're listening to this, the money in your account is worth less than when you started this sentence. Every second, purchasing power slips away. You can't see it, you can't stop it, but you can feel it every time you buy groceries, every time you fill your tank, every time you check your rent. A German schoolteacher named Anna carried a wheelbarrow stuffed with cash just to buy a single loaf of bread, not a cart full of groceries. One loaf, her life savings earned over 40 years of teaching children, could barely buy lunch. An American teacher swipes 3 credit cards, all nearly maxed for the same. Weekly groceries her grandmother bought with cash from a single paycheck, different century, different currencies, same trap. What if I told you this isn't random? What if every dollar you've saved is designed to lose value? Not by accident, by design. What if that's not a bug in the system, it's the feature? To understand where we're headed, we need to go back, not decades, centuries. Because history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And right now, that rhyme is getting louder. So loud that if you listen carefully, you can hear it in every transaction you make. There's a pattern hidden in history, a cycle that appears across empires, across continents, across thousands of years. It's been documented, studied, and published in academic journals. Yet it's rarely taught in schools. Why? Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize the signs, you notice them everywhere. And here's what should concern you. We're not at the beginning of this cycle. We're at stage 7 of 8. The final stage is collapse. But before we get there, let me show you how this pattern works, how it's worked for 2,000 years, how it's working right now. Let me take you to Rome, 235 AD. The empire stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia. Gold and silver coins clinked in merchant hands across 3 continents. Trade flourished. Cities gleamed with marble temples. Roman citizens believed their prosperity was eternal. They thought they'd mastered economics. They were certain their empire was different from all that came before. They were wrong. The Roman government faced a problem. They needed to pay soldiers, fund wars, build monuments, but the treasury was running low. So they made a decision that would echo through history. They debased the currency. They took silver coins that were once 95% pure silver and slowly reduced the silver content, first to 90%, then 70%, then 50%. By 268 AD, Roman coins contained just 5% silver, the other 95% base metal, worthless source. The Antonine Plague and the Spread of Christianity by Cambridge University Press. Roman Economic History by Oxford Press. Merchants weren't stupid. They could weigh the coins, test them. They knew they were getting cheated. So they did what any rational person would do. They raised prices. A loaf of bread that cost a denarii suddenly cost 5, then 10, then 20. Within a generation, prices increased 20-fold. Sound familiar? Your grocery bill jumped 25% in 3 years. Your eggs went from $2 to $6, that's a 200% increase. Source USDA Price Index, 2024, your landlord wants more rent every year. Your health insurance premiums doubled while your coverage shrunk. The numbers are different, the century is different, but the pattern, identical. Roman soldiers started demanding payment in actual goods food land, anything but the debased currency. Farmers stopped bringing food to markets because the money they received was worthless by the time they got home. Within 50 years, the empire fractured. Not from external enemies, from internal economic collapse. The currency died first. The empire followed. This collapse didn't end with Rome. The lesson wasn't learned, it was forgotten. Fast forward 13 centuries, Spain, 1500s. The Spanish Empire controlled half the known world. Gold and silver poured in from the Americas, literal shiploads of precious metals flooding into Spanish ports. The empire was drowning in wealth. King Philip II believed Spain would dominate Europe forever. How could it not? They had unlimited gold. But here's what they missed. Flooding your economy with precious metals is just another form of currency, debasement. When you double the money supply, you cut the value of each coin in half. Basic economics. But empires never learn this lesson until it's too late. Spanish prices quadrupled over 80 years. A working family that could afford meat twice a week could suddenly afford it once a month. Bread prices soared, rent skyrocketed. The wealth gap exploded. The poor starved while nobles lived in palaces made of stolen gold. Source: Spanish Inflation in the 16th Century by Economic History Review, Cambridge, The Irony. Spain controlled the gold mines, but couldn't control the consequences. By 1600, the empire was bankrupt, not broke bankrupt. They literally defaulted on their debts multiple times. The nation with unlimited gold couldn't pay its bills. Your retirement account might hold $200,000. Sounds secure, right? But if inflation runs at 6% annually, that $200,000 loses $12,000 in purchasing power every year. In 10 years, it's worth $111,000 in today's money. You didn't spend it, you didn't lose it, it just ... evaporated. Source: CPI Calculator, Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's the Spanish gold paradox. Having money doesn't matter if the money doesn't hold value. The pattern continued. 7 generations later, it repeated in a different form. France, 1790s. The French Revolution had toppled the monarchy. The new government needed funds immediately. Wars to fight, citizens to feed, a nation to rebuild. So they created a new currency backed by confiscated church lands. They called it the assignat. It was supposed to be safe, stable, trustworthy. It wasn't. The government printed assignments to fund everything. More currency in circulation meant more ability to spend, they reasoned. For a while, it worked. The economy seemed to boom. But merchants, once again, weren't fooled. They knew what was coming. They remembered what happened to Rome. They watched prices carefully. Within 4 years, the assignat lost 99% of its value. A currency that started as backed by land became backed by nothing but government promises. And government promises, as history repeatedly shows, are the least reliable form of backing. Source: When Money Dies by Adam Ferguson. Marie Helene, a Parisian baker's wife, watched her savings disintegrate. Money she'd set aside for her daughter's dowry couldn't buy a week's worth of flour. The dowry was gone. The future was gone. All that remained was the daily struggle to afford bread, which she ironically knew how to bake, but couldn't afford the ingredients for. Your student loan payment is $503 a month. Your median rent is $1,800. That's $2,303 before you eat, before you drive, before you exist beyond having shelter and debt. One paycheck, gone. Source: Federal Student Aid, 2024. Zillow Rent Index, 2024, different century, same crushing math. This pattern went dormant for a while. The 1800s saw relative monetary stability under gold standards, but stability breeds complacency, and complacency breeds the next crisis. November 1923, Weimar, Germany. This is where the pattern reached its most extreme conclusion. This is where wheelbarrows entered the story. World War I had ended 5 years earlier. Germany owed massive reparations to the Allied powers. The government couldn't pay, so they did what every government in this situation has done. They printed money, lots of it, mountains of it, tsunamis of worthless paper currency. By November 1923, $1 equaled 4.2 trillion German marks, not a million, not a billion. Trillion. Source: German Economic History Archives. Bundesbank. Historical database. Let me give you a picture of what this meant for ordinary people. Friedrich Muller was a train conductor, a respectable middle-class job. Every morning, he'd get paid his daily wages. He wouldn't wait until evening. He couldn't. By evening, the money would be worth half as much. So his wife would meet him at lunch with a shopping bag, not to carry groceries, to carry the money. Bricks of bills, stacks of worthless paper. They'd rush to the market. Bread, that cost 250 marks in the morning, cost 400 by afternoon. The baker couldn't post prices. He used a chalkboard. He updated it every hour. Customers would grab whatever they could afford at that moment because waiting meant poverty. People burned money for heat. It was cheaper than buying firewood, papered walls with currency, used it as wallpaper. That's not a metaphor. They literally glued banknotes to walls because it was cheaper than buying actual wallpaper. Life savings vanished overnight. Elderly people who'd saved for 50 years discovered their entire life's work could buy one loaf of bread. Pensions became cruel jokes. The social contract shattered, and into that chaos stepped extremism. We know how that story ended. Source: The Downfall of Money by Frederick Taylor. Weimar Economic Studies, IMF Historical Research. You're watching this happen in slow motion. Your savings account earns 0.5% interest. Inflation runs at 4 to 7%. Every year, your savings lose 3 to 6% in purchasing power. If you saved $10,000 in 2020, it's worth $8,200 in actual purchasing power today. Source: Federal Reserve Interest Rate Data, 2024. Consumer Price Index, Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2024. You're not being robbed by criminals. You're being robbed by mathematics. But Weimar was the past, you might think. We have central banks now, modern economics, safety measures. We learned from history. Did we? Japan, 19... The Japanese economy was unstoppable. Tokyo real estate was so valuable that the Imperial Palace grounds were theoretically worth more than all of California. Stock markets soared. Everyone was getting rich. American economists wrote worried articles about how Japan would surpass the US. The future was Japanese. Then the bubble popped. Japanese real estate lost 80% of its value over the next decade. The stock market collapsed. But here's the truly devastating part. Japan entered a deflationary spiral that lasted 30 years. Prices fell. Sounds good, right? Wrong. When prices fall, people delay purchases. Why buy today when it'll be cheaper tomorrow? Businesses can't sell goods. They lay off workers. Those workers stop spending. The spiral deepens. Source: The Aftermath of Japan's Asset Bubble by Bank of Japan Research, IMF Working Papers. Tanaka Kenji retired in 1990 with what seemed like a comfortable nest egg. He watched it slowly become insufficient as his cost of living adjustments never materialized. His retirement plan assumed 3% annual returns. He got 0.1% for 3 decades. He lived 30 years longer than his money. Your 401k assumes average returns of 7% annually. What if you get 1%? What if you get negative returns for a decade? Your retirement plan just became a retirement hope, and hope isn't a financial strategy. The pattern accelerated in the modern era, crisis after crisis, each following the same stages. August 2007. Banks started failing. Not small banks, major institutions. Bear Stearns collapsed. Then Lehman Brothers, 158-year-old investment bank, filed for bankruptcy on September 15, 2008. $619 billion in debt. The largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Source: Lehman Brothers bankruptcy filing. U.S. courts archive the government's response. Print money. Trillions in quantitative easing. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded from $870 billion in 2007 to $4.5 trillion by 2014. Source: Federal Reserve balance sheet historical data. Don't worry, they said. This is different. We have sophisticated tools, modern monetary theory, we can control inflation. Can we? COVID pandemic? The economy shut down? The government's response: print more money, stimulus checks, forgivable loans, enhanced unemployment, well-intentioned policies, necessary perhaps, but economically, more currency creation. The result? In 2024, you're living through it. Inflation hit 9.1% in June 2020, to the highest in 41 years. Source: Bureau of Labor Statistics, Consumer Price Index, 2022. It's cooled to 3 to 4% now, but that's still eroding your purchasing power faster than wages increase. Let me break down what this means for your actual life, your household budget, your daily reality. Groceries: a dozen eggs cost $1.50 in January 2020. They hit $4.82 in January 2023. That's a 221% increase. Source: USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. Egg price data: a pound of ground beef went from $3.89 to $5.36. Milk jumped from $3.25 to $4.21 per gallon. Your weekly grocery bill increased by $40 to $60 for the same items. That's $2,000 to $3,000 annually for the same food. Rent: the average rent in major U.S. cities climbed from $1,420 in 2020 to $1,779 in 2024. That's a 25% increase. Source: Zillow Rent Index. National average in cities like Austin, Miami, and Phoenix, rents jumped 40 to 50%. If you're spending $1,800 on rent, you're paying $360 more monthly than 4 years ago for the same apartment. That's $4,320 annually money. that can't go to savings, can't pay down debt, can't build wealth: healthcare. Insurance premiums increased 30% from 2020 to 2024, while deductibles rose and coverage shrank. Source: Kaiser Family Foundation, Employer Health Benefits Survey, 2024. You're paying more and getting less. The average family premium hit $23,968 annually. That's $1,997 per month. For insurance, not actual healthcare, just the insurance. Student loans. The total U.S. student debt stands at $1.77 trillion as of 2024. Source: Federal Student Aid Data Center. 2024, the average monthly payment is $503. For borrowers making the median individual income of $56,000. That's 11% of gross income before taxes. After taxes, nearly 15% every month. For decades, transportation. Gas prices spiked to $5.02 per gallon nationally in June 2022. Source: Energy Information Administration, 2022. They've dropped to $3.40 to $3.80, but that's still 40% higher than pre-pandemic levels. If you commute, that's an extra $50 to $80 monthly AD, and vehicle prices. Used cars increased 35% from 2020 to 2024, and transportation costs are crushing household budgets. As of October 2024, the U.S. national debt stands at $35.7 trillion. Source: U.S. Treasury Department, October 2024. That's $270,000 per taxpayer, not per household, per taxpayer. The interest payment alone exceeds $1 trillion annually. That's more than defense spending, more than Medicare. Just the interest. Here's the math that should terrify you. Debt compounds. If we maintain current spending, the national debt will hit $50 trillion by 2030. Source: Congressional Budget Office projections. 2024, at some point, the only way to service this debt is to print more currency. And when you print more currency, each dollar loses value. You've seen this movie. You know how it ends. Notice the pattern. You're paying more for everything. Your paycheck hasn't kept pace. Wage growth from 2020 to 2024 averaged 3.8% annually. Inflation averaged 6.2%. Source: Bureau of Labor Statistics, Employment Cost Index versus CPI, 2024. You got a raise. It was a pay cut. This isn't economic theory. This is your life. Every transaction, every bill, every purchase. You're living through currency debasement in real time. The method is different, the mechanism is modern, but the pattern is ancient, and the ending is predictable. But we have the Federal Reserve. You might argue, central banks can control this. Can they? The Federal Reserve existed in 1929, couldn't prevent the Great Depression. Existed in 2008, couldn't prevent the housing collapse. Exists now. And inflation still hit 9%. This time is different. That's what every empire said. Rome thought their military power made them immune. Spain thought their gold made them invincible. Weimar thought modern banking would save them. Japan thought their technological advancement would protect them. All believed they were the exception. None were. The pattern repeats because human psychology doesn't change. Governments face debts they can't pay. Politicians face voters demanding services. Central banks face pressure to stimulate the economy, so they create currency. It's politically easier than raising taxes or cutting spending. It's economically disastrous. But economic disasters happen slowly. Political consequences happen immediately. So they choose inflation. They choose currency creation. They choose to debase the currency. Not because they're evil, because they're human, and humans consistently choose short-term relief over long-term stability. Here's the truly frightening part. We're not at the beginning of this cycle. The signs are all present. Currency creation is accelerating. Debt levels unsustainable. Asset prices disconnected from fundamentals. Wealth inequality exploding. Public trust in institutions is eroding. These aren't random events. These are stages in a documented pattern. Rome showed us stage 1 through 8. Spain confirmed it. France repeated it. Weimar demonstrated the extreme version. Japan proved it happens to modern economies. 2008 was a warning. 2020 was the acceleration. 2024, we're watching the pattern unfold in real time. Different historians count the stages differently, but they all agree on the core progression: currency debasement, price inflation, public distrust, political instability, social fragmentation, economic crisis, complete collapse. We've passed the first 5 stages. We're deep into the 6th. So here's what I can't stop thinking about. Every empire believes it's the exception. Every generation thinks this time is different. But the pattern is 2,000 years old. It survived empires, revolutions, world wars, and technological transformation. It's outlasted every form of government humans have tried. Why would it stop now? What makes us different from every civilization that came before? Our smartphones, our algorithms, our democratic institutions. History has an answer to that question, and it's not comforting. 5 empires. Same warning signs, same stages, same denial, same collapse. The dates change, the details differ, the names are different, but the pattern, identical. Every single time you feel it already, don't you? Something isn't right. The numbers don't add up anymore. You're working harder and falling behind. That's not in your head. That's not laziness. That's mathematics catching up with policy. That's currency debasement reaching your household budget. That's history rhyming. Your grocery receipt tells a story. Your rent increase writes a chapter. Your savings account, losing purchasing power, illustrates the plot. The only question remaining is, how does this story end? And perhaps more importantly, what role will you play in the ending? The pattern repeats, always, without fail. The question isn't whether the cycle continues. The question is whether we'll recognize it before we reach stage 8, whether we'll be the generation that breaks the pattern, or the generation that confirms it. Look at your last grocery receipt. Then ask yourself, is this normal, or is this a warning? So let me ask you this. When did you first notice things changing? Was it at the grocery store when you realized you were spending twice as much for half the cart? Was it at the gas pump? The rent renewal notice? That moment when you checked your savings account and realized it wasn't growing, it was shrinking in real terms. Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I have a feeling your stories will reveal just how far into this pattern we've already traveled. Here's what's coming in the next video. There's one detail about this pattern that I haven't told you yet. One decision point that appears in every single cycle. One moment where the path could change, but it never does. Why? That's what we'll explore next time. The psychology of collapse. Why do smart people make predictable mistakes? Why are warnings always ignored until it's too late? You won't want to miss it. If this made you see your grocery bill differently, hit subscribe. More patterns, more history, more truth about the money in your pocket. Every week, we'll connect what happened then to what's happening now, because the past isn't dead. It isn't even past, it's your bank statement. Thank you for watching this through. I know it's not comfortable. Truth rarely is. But understanding the pattern is the first step to navigating it. See you in the next one.